And in accordance with the legislation that was passed last month, this meeting is being held as an electronic meeting without an anchor location for the reason that the COVID-19 pandemic and the continued risks of transmission in Utah may make an anchor location a significant risk to the health and safety of the public. So and I've confirmed that all 5 board members are on the line before we've begun. The first item of business for us to discuss is the purpose of this meeting was to discuss pending or imminent litigation, particularly the appeal of the board's decision and the board's role as a respondent in that appeal and what that role should be. And I'll just say to the board members, in my view, we could close the meeting under the Open and Public Meetings Act under the subsection that describes strategy sessions to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation. We're not required to. We could have this discussion in public with all the participants that are on the line, and we're also currently streaming it. If we closed it, of course, we'd stop the stream. So I'll open this up for board discussion. Do any board members have a desire to make a motion to close the meeting for this discussion topic? And if so, we would need at least a 2/3 vote of board members to do so. So if there's any discussion or motions from board members on this issue, I will open it up for that.
Chair LeVar, this is Dave Clark. Let me offer first that what I intend to say, I would be happy to say in a public meeting, but I want to defer to any other member that has strategic comments in mind that ought not to be public. And so that's my position, and I'm waiting to hear from a member that feels that what they'd like to say ought to be confidential.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. Any other board members have any thoughts or comments on the issue? Or desire to make a motion? Okay, well, I think I'll just state that I'm not hearing any desire to close the meeting. So with that, I think we'll remain open to the public. So all participants who've called in can stay on the line unless that changes as we move forward. And we will continue streaming the meeting as we normally do. The only issue that we have to discuss today is what role the board will play, if any, in the appeal. You know, under the Administrative Procedures Act, the board is a party to the appeal. The board is the party. The respondent or the appellee, however you describe it, I can't remember which one is the proper term. Sometimes the board could participate and file a brief in the appeal. The board could also view its role as more like a court and allow Midway City and Rocky Mountain Power to file their briefs on the appeal and to stay out of it. But since we're a party, we have that option. So I'll open that up to any discussion by board members if they have a desire to ask the attorney for the Public Service Commission, who is providing staff support to the board, to plan to file a brief on the board's behalf when this matter goes to full briefing before the court. If any board member has comments or thoughts on the issue, please jump in and indicate your thoughts.
Chair LeVar, this is Dave Clark again. I do have a viewpoint that I'd like to express. In my view, the Council for Midway City raised questions about the board's competence to make findings of fact in support of our judgments in the matter, and but for that, I might be inclined to encourage us to simply allow Rocky Mountain Power and Midway City and Volt to litigate without our participation. But because of that questioning of the board's competence, so at least that's my interpretation of some of the arguments they made, as well as arguing that our findings were not supported by the evidence in some instances. In my view, we should file a brief, and in my view, that brief should be a careful explication of the facts that underlie each of our findings in sufficient detail that it will be clear to the Court of Appeals that every material finding that we made was amply supported in the record, as I believe it was.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. Any other thoughts or comments from board members? I'm not hearing anybody jumping in, so Mr. Clark, do you want to rephrase your comments as a motion that we could take a vote on as a board?
Certainly, Chair LeVar, I move that the board participate in the appellate process by filing a brief, the purpose of which will be to demonstrate the record evidence that supports each of the findings of fact that the board made in reaching the conclusions, and linking those findings to the conclusions that we expressed in our orders to this point. So that's my motion.
Okay, thank you. Can I request to make one amendment just to add to that motion that we request that the attorney from the Public Service Commission who is providing staff support to the board draft that brief and coordinate with board members on its filing?
Yeah, thank you for that addition. I certainly support that.
Okay, any discussion to the motion or a second from any board member?
This is Glenn Wright. I'll second the motion.
Okay, I'm sorry. There were two at the time. I heard Mr. Wright second the motion. There was one other individual who was speaking.
Yeah, Troy Fitzgerald. Just a comment now that we have a second. My inclination in coming here was to just let the record stand as it is. I've got no concern if we want to supplement that by the explanation as presented by the motion, but I think the record is what the record is, but I won't stand in opposition to what's presented so far.
Any other discussion to the motion that's been made and seconded? I'll just comment that, you know, I also understand both directions, and I understand Mr. Fitzgerald's concern. And I think we want to be careful if we file a motion that that we don't take too strong of an advocacy position, other than just defending the process that the board went through and compliance with the statute. So that would be my only thoughts on that. If there are no other comments, are we ready to take a vote on the motion? And Mr. Allen, your name starts with A. I've typically done these votes alphabetically. So, Mr. Allen, how do you vote on the motion?
Allen votes aye, but I would like to also explain that even though I've only been back on the board for a few weeks, for people who might be listening, and I served on the board before in a very extensive case back in 2011 or so. But also, more importantly, I've read all the testimony in the case, including the transcripts of all of the hearing, and have kept myself involved in this case. But this is going forward, so my vote today has a lot more to do with just making sure that that I support the board and that understanding the case is not nearly as important as making sure that parties understand, and from everything I've read, that the process was handled correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Clark.
How about yes?
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald?
I'll abstain from this one.
Okay, thank you. I vote yes. Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Okay, with 4 yeses and 1 abstention, that motion passes. And then I think the only remaining business for us to discuss today is a similar question, whether to participate in the motion briefing on the stay. And most of this has already gone on with the court not waiting for the board to weigh in on the stay issue at all. We denied the stay administratively, and there have been a lot of motions and responses filed with the court. There was a motion filed just yesterday by Rocky Mountain Power to ask a panel of the court to reconsider the decision by one member of the court. So to me, the final order of business is whether the board will ask the PSC attorney to weigh in to any degree on the stay motions, or whether the board will just wait and file a brief when the appeal gets fully briefed. Any thoughts or comments on that? Mr. Fitzgerald, since you expressed concerns about the other issue, I assume you would probably have similar concerns about getting involved as a board in the stay issue.
Well, this is Troy Fitzgerald. With the board moving forward and explaining its factual basis with that vote, I don't see why you wouldn't do something similar with the stay.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other board comments or thoughts on the issue? Does any board member want to make a motion on this issue? Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion. Not hearing any other board members wanting to, I would move that the board request the attorney who's providing staff support to the board to file a response to Rocky Mountain Power's latest request for reconsideration, simply indicating that the board has not yet responded to any of the stay motions, but that the board does intend to file a brief in the appeal demonstrating that all of its findings were supported by substantial evidence. That's the statement that I'd suggest we could make without necessarily advocating for or against the stay, and also just noting that we denied a stay administratively for the reasons we described in our order, and that we intend to demonstrate that all of our findings were supported by substantial evidence. So I'll put that forward as a motion if any board member has an interest in seconding that motion.
This is Dave Clark. I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion before we take a vote on the motion? Okay, I'm not hearing anyone, so we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Clark? You might be on mute, Mr. Clark.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0. I'm unaware of any other business unless any other board member is aware of anything else we need to discuss with respect to this appeal. I'm not hearing anything, so with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your participation, particularly Mr. Allen. Thank you for joining us. As the newest member of this board, we're happy to have you here, and hopefully we'll have you on a Public Service Commission hearing soon, too.
Can't wait.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Thank you all.